Well, hello everyone, it's Jordan Tower here, and in this episode of Freecraft, I will be explaining should Christians be open-minded. So the answer to that is, well, that depends on if the topic being addressed is a salvation issue or a non-salvation issue. So to begin with, we should be open-minded when it comes to the non-salvation issues. So those are the secondary and tertiary issues. Or such issues have no effect on salvation. Some examples of non-essentials are topics like infant baptism, Calvinism, or predestination, and the filioque, etc. Now, those are some examples of secondary issues. Some other examples of non-essentials are topics like the holidays, hair dyeing, or tattoos. Or innocent video games. Now, those are some examples of tertiary issues. And so we may have whichever view we want when it comes to the non-salvation issues. And that is as long as we do not attempt to elevate the non-essentials to essentials. As Christians, we should not attempt to elevate the non-essentials to essentials. So as Christians, we should not be closed-minded when it comes to the non-essentials. And since being closed-minded on the non-essentials is going to lead to division. And if you attempt to elevate the non-essentials to essentials, then you're adding to God's word. And that is forbidden. And so we must be open-minded when it comes to the non-essentials, which are, again, the secondary and the tertiary issues. Now, the difference between those two is that the secondary issues are theological topics that do not affect salvation, meanwhile the tertiary issues are the non-theological topics that obviously do not affect salvation. So there could be a brother in Christ who believes in infant baptism, and the brother in Christ who believes in believer's baptism, and we all know that they will both go to heaven when they die. And the same thing goes for the Christian who is a Calvinist and the Christian who is a non-Calvinist. And I myself am not a Calvinist, and I'm just using that as an example. So we are allowed to agree to disagree when it comes to the non-essentials. And in most instances, the secondary issues usually determine your denomination, while the tertiary issues determines just your personal preferences. In Matthew 12:25 we read, "And Jesus knew their thoughts and said unto them, Every kingdom divided against itself is brought to destruction, and every city or house divided against itself shall not stand." In verse 26, "And if Satan cast out Satan, he is divided against himself. How shall then his kingdom stand?" So, you do not attempt to elevate the non-essentials through the essentials, because that will cause division in the church. And we know that a house divided against itself does not stand. And there's a saying that united we stand, divided we fall. And there's also this. If you condemn others over the non-essentials, that is extremely immature. Since that is taking a self-righteous stance on non-essentials. Something like this is never okay. Do not call preachers a heretic, just because they preach a different view on a non-essential. And for those of you who make videos exposing false teachers, if you condemn them over non-essentials, then that is not the right way to expose them. And in that sense, it is blatantly immature to condemn others over non-essentials. Since when you expose false teachers, only point out the heresies that they teach, not a theological disagreement on non-essentials. And to that extent, having different views on non-essentials does not make someone a false teacher. It's the preaching of heresies that makes someone a false teacher. So, for example, if a preacher preaches believers' baptism, then that does not make him a false teacher. But on the flip side, if he preaches egalitarianism or modalism, then that indeed makes me a false teacher. Since egalitarianism and modalism are heresies. So there's false teachings, and then there's heresies. So a mere false teaching is a doctrine that is false, and we're believing in it will not necessarily place someone outside of salvation, but there is a risk of that person being led astray if he or she buys into that particular doctrine. And then a heresy is a doctrine that is so deceptive that believing in it places someone outside of salvation. So, for example, Arianism is a heresy, while on the other hand, the pre-trib rapture is not a heresy. And that is also since the topic of when the rapture takes place is a secondary issue. Now it's time to talk about when we should not be open-minded. So we should not be open-minded when it comes to these salvation issues. So those are the essentials. And these are also known as the primary issues. Some examples of primary issues are topics like the Trinity, or Christ's resurrection, sola fide, and the rest of the five solas. The biblical gender roles of the church and family, things like that. Those are some examples of the essentials. And also biblical inerrancy. Those are some examples of primary issues. So those are the topics where we must have a strict stance on getting it right. And that is since we must have a strict stance on getting it right when it comes to the essentials. And that is since those topics affect salvation. So, for example, a person is not truly Christian if a person does not believe in biblical inerrancy or the Trinity, or in Christ's resurrection, etc. So there's this saying, liberty in the essentials. Unity in essentials, liberty in non-essentials. So that means that we must have a strict stance on getting it right when it comes to the essentials. And then we are allowed to agree to disagree when it comes to the non-essentials. So with topics like the Trinity, biblical inerrancy, sola fide, the other of the five solas, the biblical gender roles of the church and the family, and other Christ's resurrection. And when it comes to those topics, we must have a strict stance on getting it right. Since these topics are the essentials, which means that they are the non-negotiable topics, because they are primary issues. And since getting these topics wrong is heretical. Do not attempt to reduce essentials to non-essentials, since that too causes division. And that is also something that is more dangerous, since attempting to reduce essentials to non-essentials can lead to more heresies being preached behind the pulpits. The absolute biggest reason why there is so much division in the church is that throughout history we have had the combination of attempting to reduce the essentials to the non-essentials, and also attempting to elevate the essentials, the non-essentials to the essentials. And that is quite a diabolical combination. And that is since the non-essentials should never be elevated to the essentials, because those topics don't affect salvation. And then the essentials should never be reduced to non-essentials, because those topics are salvation issues. So that is it for this video. Have a nice day, and goodbye.